Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Juliet Lawton of the Business Lincolnshire Events team. I'd like to welcome you to the Room at the Inn webinar, which we hope will provide a comprehensive overview of all you need to know if you are thinking of providing accommodation to boost your pub's turnover. Here at Business Lincolnshire and Team Lincolnshire, we recognise that our pubs and tourism offer is growing strongly across the county, and increasing numbers of visitors are interested in staying in high quality pub accommodation. This is being fuelled by the unprecedented rise in domestic tourism. The Greater Lincolnshire Pub Development Project sets out to encourage pubs across the area to add rooms or alternative accommodation to their establishment to support rural tourism. Business Lincolnshire has developed a free toolkit and will be providing online workshops, of which this is the first, which include practical advice around developing accommodation within a pub, restaurant or similar establishment. Pubs have traditionally been the heart of communities and have played a vital part in rural life. This scheme supports our growing visitor economy by providing more high quality accommodation, helps breathe life into many of our pubs and helps them diversify after the pandemic. It also meets the demand needed for more high quality visitor accommodation, which is being fuelled by the rise in demand for UK holidays. If we can encourage pubs to add or upgrade existing accommodation, this will strengthen our tourism offer. Pubs are vital in driving economic growth through job creation and attracting residents and visitors to an area to spend their money. Beyond this, they play such an important role in our communities, which can be so important to our mental health and community cohesion, especially in rural areas. This webinar will kickstart this exciting project, and we are delighted to be joined by a panel of experts. We'll also be hearing about another terrific scheme run by Lincolnshire County Council, the Inns on the Edge, which dovetails our pub development project and has certainly attracted a lot of national media attention over the last few months. We realise that for many pubs across our region, life after lockdown still represents many challenges. However, we also believe that domestic tourism could be on the verge of a new opportunity, with many people choosing to holiday in the UK for the foreseeable. In addition, many pubs may also look to diversify their offer to help future-proof their business. There's never been a more optimum time to invest in our pubs. We hope you find inspiration as well as practical advice and support from this webinar, and we'll be on hand to continue this over the next year as we roll out our project. Without any further delay, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Andrew Keeling, who will be explaining the Greater Lincolnshire Pub Development Programme in more detail. Andrew is one of the two directors of Hotel Solutions Consultancy Partnership, which specialises in working with UK destinations to help them to understand and realise the potential for hotel and visitor accommodation development in their area. So I'll pass over to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Juliet. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I hope you'll find it useful and informative. I just want to start just by telling you who I am, so you know who I am. I'm a hotelier by background. I started my career in hotels about 40 years ago, so I was a mere boy at the time, as you can imagine. And then for the last 20 years, I've worked with my colleague Lynn Thomason as a hotel and visitor accommodation development consultant, and we have specialised in working with UK local authorities, public sector bodies, destination management organisations, helping them to understand and realise the potential for hotel and visitor accommodation development in their area, and that has often included looking at the opportunities for pub accommodation. Over the last 2 years, Lynn and I have worked with Nikki Shepherd at the Greater Lincolnshire LEP and her colleagues to progress the pub accommodation development programme. So that's included an audit of pub accommodation. It's also included the development of a pub accommodation guide, the Room at the Inn guide, and we will be sharing a link with that to that guide with you, where there's a lot more information, a lot of what we're covering today, but also a lot more information in that guide. And then today's webinar. Now, we had originally hoped to run this webinar as a workshop in a room with you all, and that's a much better way of doing this because you get a lot more interaction and it would work a lot better, but obviously because of COVID-19 we've not been able to do that. So the purpose of today really is to provide some initial guidance to those of you that are currently thinking about pub accommodation, and also some information and hints and tips to those of you that are already running pub accommodation in terms of how you might be able to improve and how you can hopefully get more business out of your accommodation operation. So the format is I'm going to run a session. It's about an hour long, maybe not quite that long, but really just looking at the market for pub accommodation, who might want to stay with you, what the market is looking for when they're looking for to stay in a pub, how much you might be able to earn, a key question that I'm sure you all want to know about, and then things that you need to consider when you're looking at setting up a pub accommodation business. We then should have time for some questions, and as Juliet said, please do type in your questions if you've got questions as we go through, and Juliet will feed those back through to us. I'm then going to pass on to Chris Jones from Bateman's, who's going to talk about pub accommodation development from the Bateman's perspective. And then we'll have Sarah Grundy from the Inns on the Edge project, who will look at how pubs can potentially exploit their heritage features and stories and use those to generate business. And then I'm going to come back in at the end just with a short session looking at how you can stand out from the crowd, and also some marketing tips. I know people often want to know about marketing. I'm not a marketing expert, but I can share some tips with you. We've also got other people on the call. We've got a gentleman called Ian Carrington, who's a planning officer from East Lindsey District Council, who is here to answer questions on planning. My colleague Lynn Thomason is on the call. We've got Charlotte Goy and Samantha Plover from Visit Lincoln, I think, and Trudy Roberts from Business Lincolnshire. I think Nikki Shepherd as well from the Greater Lincolnshire. So there's plenty of people on the call that can answer questions either this afternoon or afterwards. In terms of the pubs that are attending, it's quite a mixed audience. So we've got a number of you that are already running accommodation, and in a workshop situation, I would try and encourage those of you that are already doing it to share your experience. And obviously we can't do that today, but if there are things as we go through that you want to share with the group, then just put those into the chat box, and then Juliet can pick those up and feed those back at the question and answer session. And then we've got some of you that are, as far as I'm aware, are at the early stages of thinking about adding accommodation to your pub. So there should be something in the webinar for everybody. Just so you're aware, I think Juliet said we will be sending you the slides from the webinar afterwards, so there's no need for you to take notes as we go through, but it would be helpful if you've got a pen and paper to hand. If there are things you want to jot down, then that's helpful, and there's a couple of sections where I'm just going to ask you to do a bit of thinking, so you might need that. So if we can move on to the next slide, please, Charlotte. Can we move the slide, Charlotte?
I'm not quite sure what's happened there, Andrew. So if you want to just carry with that next slide, I'll just see if we can get that sorted for you. Okay.
Okay. So we'll try and sort the technical difficulty. Just in terms of timings, we should be finished by 4 o'clock for any of you that are wanting to watch the football. We'll certainly make sure that we are. Oh, right. Okay. Right. Actually, can you just move that one on again, Charlotte, from that next slide? So yeah, so in terms of pub accommodation, just to define what we're talking about, I think when you talk about pub accommodation, most people think about pub rooms, so rooms above the pub, and certainly we're looking at that, and that can be a range of different styles and standards, from more mid-range to luxury rooms to more traditional bedrooms to more contemporary rooms. Move on, Charlotte. But you could also be looking at converted outbuildings for bedrooms, or a new build bedroom extension, or possibly pod rooms. The pictures on the right there, the Snugs at the Salutation Inn at Nettleton, and there we've got Joe Parsons on the call. Or you might want to think about glamping units, which could be pods, or could be shepherd's huts, or canvas tents, bell tents, yurts, those sorts of things. So it doesn't necessarily need to be about B&B accommodation. You could think about glamping. Or potentially a campsite if you've got land at the back of the pub or the side of the pub. That could just be a small, simple site, or you might want to look at a larger site if you've got the space. Or finally, you might want to think about a motorhome stopover. There's quite a lot of a strong growth market in terms of motorhomes, motorhome ownership growing. Pubs can capitalise on that market. It helps to get some extra spend into the pub in the evening. And again, that can be as simple overnight parking, or you could look at adding in electric hookup, water supply, waste disposal. And there are, if you're interested in that, there are various organisations you can work with, like Britstop, Pub Stopovers, Motor Caravan Club. So we'll have a quick look at that, but a lot of the focus is going to be about pub accommodation. So if you want to move on, Charlotte. So why would you think about pub accommodation or adding pub accommodation to your business? I think the first thing I would say is that there's growing demand for pub accommodation. We've seen significant growth in pub accommodation over the last 4 or 5 years, and generally that accommodation is finding a good market. So whenever I'm talking to a pub that's providing accommodation, it's usually doing quite well. People love the idea of staying in a pub, and particularly overseas visitors. They'll often love the idea of staying in a quintessential English country pub. So it's a strong market, it's a growing market. If you add accommodation, that gives you a third income stream to add to your food and drink sales. And it's quite a profitable income stream as well. The profits on accommodation are good. They're probably higher, it's a higher rate than you will get on food and drink. So a lot of that income that you'll receive for your accommodation will drop straight through to your bottom line. Adding accommodation, it opens your business up to a new customer base. So you're going beyond just the local customers that you're catering for food and drink to people from much further afield that might then be attracted to come and stay with you. Those people will then spend in the pub, so that will increase food and drink sales. There's potential, depending on your location, if you can attract business visitors, that might help you with sort of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights when you're perhaps quieter in the pub. That will give you some additional food and drink trade from those business visitors. It should help you increase your profits. It should help you to increase the hours for your staff, so giving your staff better jobs, better hours. It helps you to make use of new spaces and actually get those working for you and monetizing them. And if you own the business, it will also help to increase the value of the pub if you ever come to sell it. If you've added accommodation, that will increase the value. So lots of reasons why you would think about pub accommodation. We can move on, Charlotte. So just to give you some context when we're thinking about pub accommodation, so in terms of the national picture, so in terms of national supply, there are around about 6,000 UK pub accommodation businesses offering 50,000 bedrooms, and that supply is growing. Between 2016 and 2019, there were about 300 new pub accommodation businesses open. And also revenue growth from pub accommodation sales is growing at a faster rate than food and drink sales. So pub accommodation supply and demand is growing. If we move on to the next slide, we can see what we're looking at in terms of the greater Lincolnshire pub accommodation supply. Can we move on, Charlotte?
I think she's having some problems with audio, her and Andrew. So just bear 1 second and hope we can get her to move on. Yeah, that's what's happened. So I'm just going to tell her when you need to move on by WhatsApp, and hopefully we'll get that.
I can just put my hand up if it's easier for her to see me.
Yeah, probably do that, and then
Okay, we'll do that.
yeah, thank you.
Apologies for the technical difficulties. Right, so this is the picture in Greater Lincolnshire. So we did this in 2019. We did an audit of the pub accommodation supply, and at that stage we identified 125 pub accommodation businesses with just over 1,100 bedrooms. The main concentrations, as you can see from the table there, are in East Lindsey, out towards the coast and in the Wolds, and also good supply in North Lincolnshire. And a lot of that supply is in Scunthorpe, Brigg and Barton-on-Humber, and it's mainly sort of lower end pub accommodation that's catering for the contractors market. And then there's a good supply in South Kesteven, and a lot of that pub accommodation is of a very high quality, sort of boutique contemporary inns around Stamford, Rutland Water, and in the Vale of Belvoir, so a good supply there. But there's pub accommodation across the whole of the county. If we move on, Charlotte. In terms of standard, good spread across the range, really. A lot of the accommodation in the county is not officially graded, doesn't have a star rating. That doesn't necessarily mean it's of a low quality. So a lot of ungraded pub accommodation is very good. It just means that the owners are simply choosing not to bother with the official star rating schemes, and a lot of pub accommodation businesses don't do that anymore. Indeed, hotels don't do that anymore. But of those that are graded, majority sort of 3-star, but then there's a good supply of 4-star and a growing supply of boutique and luxury accommodation at the top end of the market. And generally, I'd say we're finding that the market is moving upwards in terms of quality. And we're seeing sort of an emergence of more boutique and contemporary accommodation, and that type of accommodation is certainly finding a very strong market and able to charge really quite high prices, which we'll look at a little bit later. So next slide, Charlotte. So in terms of size, generally pub accommodation in the county is quite small, so between 4 and 9 bedrooms. I think the average is probably around about 5 and 6 bedrooms. There's not so much in terms of very small accommodation and relatively little of any size. So generally we're talking about sort of relatively small accommodation. Next slide, Charlotte. So let's just think about this visitor market that you're all trying to get a slice of in terms of providing accommodation. So just have a think, how many people do you think visited Greater Lincolnshire in 2019? Just have a think about that. Obviously, numbers were way down in 2020 because of all the pandemic, and 2020 obviously had a very slow start with the first half of the year still being in lockdown. But in 2019, how many people do you think actually visited Greater Lincolnshire? So if we can move on, Charlotte, we'll tell everybody the answer to that question. So it was a massive 35 million visitors came to the county in 2019. So that's a huge number. A lot of those are day visitors, but a significant proportion also staying visitors. But those day visitors are also a potential market for your pub for eating and drinking. But obviously the staying visitors are the ones that we're particularly interested in today. And as you can see from the figures, the numbers were going in the right direction. So an increase in visitor numbers between 2019 and 2018 across most parts of the county. Only Lincoln and North East Lincolnshire where visitor numbers fell back for some reason. Not quite sure why that is. Obviously 2020, very different picture in 2021, but we're hoping that the figures will get back to the 2019 level by 2023, probably is the most realistic option. So if we just move on to the next slide. So how much did these visitors spend in the county? Move on again, Charlotte. So the spending was nearly 2.5 billion pounds. So that's showing you that the visitor market, it's a lucrative market. A lot of people are coming to the county and spending money. And as you can see from the percentage growth figures, actually spending is increasing at an even faster rate than visitor numbers, and that's across all parts of the county. Okay, Charlotte. Okay, so let's have a look at the future then for tourism, because obviously that's something you want to know. If you're looking at getting into providing accommodation or growing your accommodation business, you want to know that there's a viable future for tourism across the county. So the Greater Lincolnshire LEP has recently launched a new tourism action plan for Greater Lincolnshire and Rutland through until 2025. And that's very much focused initially on recovery in 2021, 2022. The focus is going to be very much about recovery as we come out of the pandemic. And let's face it, it's been a terrible time for us all, for the hospitality industry and the tourism industry, and I'm sure that you're all still reeling from the impact. But I hope that you can see the light at the end of the tunnel and your business is starting to build back now that the restrictions are easing, if not totally lifted. But beyond 2022, then I think the signs are that there will be renewed growth, and that hopefully we can get back to 2019 numbers by 2023 and then look for growth thereafter. So the signs are all positive in terms of future growth once we get past the recovery phase out of the pandemic. And the Tourism Action Plan, it's very much focused on positioning Lincolnshire as a green tourism destination. Somewhere also that you will come for outdoor activities, whether that's walking, cycling, fishing, golf. The focus is very much about extending the season. Lincolnshire is a seasonal tourism destination, particularly being a largely rural and coastal area, and there's a seasonal dimension to the demand. So the focus is to try and increase off-peak business through events, through special promotions, all of that sort of activity. There's also a focus on developing the product and investing in the visitor product. There's been quite a lot of money has gone into Lincolnshire's tourism product over the last few years with the development of Lincoln Castle that was 2015 when that opened. This year, Lincoln Cathedral's opening a new visitor centre and garden and cafe. The Bomber Command Centre opened just outside Lincoln a couple of years ago. So there's quite a lot of activity. If you're in the Grantham area, there's the Grantham Designer Outlet Village now under construction. I think that's due to open in 2023. So a whole range of different things that have been developed that are starting to attract and will attract more visitors to the county. The focus of the Tourism Action Plan is very much about quality and improving quality. And certainly from all of the work that we do in the visitor accommodation sector, quality is very much the watchword, and the market is constantly looking for ever higher quality. So it's very important to focus on a quality offer. And digital marketing. I think really marketing now in terms of the market, looking and booking accommodation, it's now almost virtually all online. There's a small proportion of the market that maybe still is going through traditional routes, but it's generally online, and you need to get into digital marketing. And then recruitment and training. Now, recruitment and training is a real issue currently, and you may be facing that yourselves in your pubs, but the hospitality sector is facing a severe recruitment difficulty, I think, from a combined effect of COVID-19 and having lost some staff to other sectors during the lockdowns, but also the impact of Brexit, which has pretty much turned the tap off for EU workers that the industry was previously so reliant on. So some real challenges. There is some pressure being put to the government to try and relax its immigration policy, to make an exception for hospitality workers, to let those people in, let EU workers come and work in our hospitality sector. So if you are facing those difficulties and you have the opportunity to support those lobbying exercises, then please do, because it is a real challenge, one we could really do without having sort of gone through COVID-19. So if we move on to the next slide, let's just have a look at the impact of COVID-19. I think we can't talk about tourism at the moment without thinking about what's happened with COVID-19. And yeah, I know it's been a really tough time for you all over the last 18 months. Hopefully you are feeling more positive and seeing the recovery starting. I think the positive thing out of COVID-19 is that we are seeing a staycation boom. Certainly this year, in 2021, all accommodation I'm seeing is pretty much booked up, probably till September, maybe even October. So a real staycation boom. Obviously, if people can't go abroad for their holidays, or they're nervous about going abroad, even if they can. Have got some green list countries now that people can go to. So people staying in the UK, and we think that will continue into 2022 and probably 2023. Beyond that, depends. We'll wait and see. I think people probably, once they can start travelling abroad again, they probably will want to start doing that. But there are some market trends that COVID-19 has accelerated, I think all of which Lincolnshire can benefit from. So the interest in taking holidays in the countryside has increased. I think people feel much more comfortable currently about taking a holiday in the countryside than they do in a town or a city where it's more crowded. The interest in outdoor activities has grown. People have been out walking, cycling, exercising, doing different activities during lockdowns, and they want to do more of that in the future on holiday and whilst they're on breaks. Dog ownership has rocketed, and demand for dog-friendly accommodation is certainly booming at the moment. I think people, this was a trend we saw before COVID-19, this trend towards experiential breaks. People want to have experiences, they want to learn something new or do some different activity whilst they're on a holiday or a break. And that trend has been accelerated as a result of the pandemic, as has interest in health and well-being. I think people are much more conscious of their health and their well-being, and that's translating into greater demand for holidays and breaks where people can pursue healthy activities or have relaxation or spa or pampering, those sorts of things. And I think the final trend there is that the concern for the environment has grown. I don't think this is necessarily stimulated by COVID-19, but I think the awareness of the climate change crisis has grown during the pandemic. People are much more concerned about the carbon footprint. They're probably less likely to travel abroad in the future, and there's certainly growing interest in eco-friendly and carbon-neutral holidays and breaks. So if we move on, Charlotte. Number of other trends to be aware of. Staycationing by older people is on the rise. I think we all know that the UK population is aging. People are living longer, but they're also fitter and healthier, and they have money and time to spend on breaks. So that's a market that's growing and certainly a strong one for Lincolnshire. But also at the other age, end of the age spectrum, millennials are now taking UK holidays and breaks independent of their parents. Having said that, they don't have a very good knowledge of UK geography, so there is an education exercise to do there. And also, they do tend to want something quite different from accommodation. So they're looking for much more relaxed and trendy and contemporary and Instagrammable accommodation. So if you want to go for that market, you maybe need to think about that. The visiting friends and relatives and weddings markets, which have really been on hold during the pandemic, they should recover and start to grow again once we come out of into recovery and as the population grows. And there's real pent-up demand, I think, from families and friends that want to get together that they've not been able to see each other for the past 18 months. So they're wanting to do that more for get-togethers and celebrations. And also the disabled visitor market. Increasing numbers of disabled people are taking holidays and breaks. There are about 14 million people in the UK that have some form of mobility, sensory or cognitive impairment, and those people are wanting to go away. And that's a big market because they also have their carers and their family with them. And if you're interested in capitalising on that disabled market, as I say, it is a significant one. There's plenty of information, lots of information, and certainly have a look at the National Accessible Scheme. That's a grading scheme which grades accommodation businesses according to how accessible they are for a range of different disabilities. So if we can move on. So we've established that there is a strong market for pub accommodation, but is pub accommodation actually right for you? And I think you need to think about this. So some thoughts here. I think first of all, have you got the right assets? So have you got upper floor space that you can use? Have you got outbuildings that you could convert? Have you got land where you could add an extension, or you could look at a campsite or a glamping site? Are you interested? Lots of publicans, they're more interested in selling beer and selling food and engaging with the locals. They don't necessarily want to be dealing with people checking in, staying overnight. So are you interested in actually looking after people that will stay with you overnight? And do you have the time? I think it's important to recognise that if you open accommodation, that's potentially going to lengthen your day. So you may need to be up early to be serving breakfast, to be checking guests out. And you might find that people who are staying with you will want to check in at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the middle of your afternoon break. So that's something to bear in mind. Obviously, you may be able to deal with that through staff. You might have staff that can cover those times, but it might lengthen your day. Can you make enough money? I think that really depends on how much accommodation you can provide. If you can only fit in 1 or 2 bedrooms, then it might not be worth it. I think the optimum is probably 4 or 5 bedrooms when it starts to make sense. Depends really what you're trying to get out of providing accommodation. Do you have the money, or can you get the money? Can you secure a loan if you need it from your bank to support you in providing accommodation? Can you access grants? There have been grants out there. It's a very changing situation, and Business Lincolnshire can provide you more information about what grant aid is available. Or if you're a tenant, can you work with your landlord, help you in terms of funding the accommodation development? And no batemans certainly will do that with their tenants. So if you're a bateman's tenant, you need to be talking to Chris about that. And finally, do you have the marketing know-how? So marketing accommodation is very different to marketing food and drink and marketing to your local market to come and eat and drink with you. If you haven't got the marketing skills and know-how, you can acquire it. There's lots of information, the various courses you can go on, and Business Lincolnshire run various courses. So if we can move on, let's just have a think about what the market is looking for then. I'd just like you to think, just cast your mind back to the last time you went away. I'm guessing that you do have time at some time to go away for a night or two, for a break in a hotel or guest house. Just have a think about what were the important things for you, what in terms of the accommodation you were looking for. So if we move the slide on, please, Charlotte. So these are just some quotes that I've picked up from TripAdvisor reviews of pub accommodation. And if you're looking at accommodation, I definitely recommend that you do this yourself. Go on TripAdvisor, look at what the reviews that the competition is getting, and that will tell you something about them. It also tells you about what's important to people when they're staying in accommodation. So these are the sort of things that people are saying. So the room is very clean, friendly locals. People staying in a pub, they often like that idea of mixing with the locals, being part of the local community and sort of immersing themselves in the local area. Lovely welcome, wonderful staff. Obviously, that's really important. Quality of service, lovely bathrooms, very comfortable bed, beautiful room, spacious and spotlessly clean. First-class food, lots of character. Some lovely touches in the room. People like those little extras. Great selection of beers, exceptionally good breakfast. And yeah, breakfast is really important. Move on, please, Charlotte. So in terms of what the market is looking for, there's a number of key things there that those quotes are telling us. So first of all, people want a good night's sleep. So things to think about there then are the mattress. You need a good quality mattress. Pillows, again, I think pillows and bedding are also important, but also think about light and curtains and blinds and noise. So if you're a noisy pub, if you're a music pub, or you've got people leaving the pub late at night, then maybe pub accommodation isn't for you, because those guests staying with you that want a quiet, good night's sleep are not going to get it. You definitely need an ensuite bathroom. That's a given these days. I don't necessarily need a bath, but if you do need good water pressure in the shower. People don't want to be standing under a dribbling shower. They want a good, powerful shower. High standards of cleanliness. Your accommodation needs to be spotlessly clean, and I think that's particularly important at the moment, because of COVID-19, people are very concerned about the cleanliness of the places that they're staying in. And you really need to make sure that you've signed up to one of the COVID-19 cleanliness assurance schemes. So there's probably the simplest one is the Visit Britain We're Good to Go scheme. So if you're not in that, then you really need to be in that. You need good Wi-Fi. That's almost as important as the ensuite these days. A warm welcome, great service, that really makes a difference. A great breakfast. It doesn't necessarily need to be a cooked breakfast, and if you're very small, if you're only looking at 1 or 2 rooms, it's probably not worthwhile doing a cooked breakfast. So you can offer a breakfast hamper. That's another alternative. But if you're doing a breakfast hamper, it needs to be good. So you can't really get away with a variety pack of cereal, a carton of orange juice, and a pre-packed croissant. Actually, you need some nice fresh fruits, some nice fresh pastries, and make that a really good breakfast hamper. If you can, a wow factor. Generally, the market now, people want to be wowed. They want something. They definitely want to stay in places that are at least as good, if not a lot better than their own homes. They're looking for that, something a bit different. They're looking for that. So they want to share their experience with their friends on social media. So they want Instagrammable features and sort of wow factors. And they want a memorable experience. And I think you need to recognize that you're not just offering a place, a bed for the night, you're offering an experience. And that's what people are looking for when they stay with you. If we move on, please, Charlotte. So who might want to stay with you? So just take a moment to think about the markets that you might be able to attract to stay in accommodation if you're providing it at the moment or thinking about it. So who might want to stay with you? What is it that they would want to be doing in the area? What would attract them? You know, how old might they be? Who would they be coming with? How long would they want to stay for? It could be a whole range of different markets that could be coming to stay with you. So it could be people coming for a weekend escape or a short break. That might be a couple older couples coming for walking or cycling or a bit of time in the countryside. Or it might be a group of older couples that want to come and have fun in the sun on the Lincolnshire coast. Or families wanting to explore the countryside or coming for a seaside holiday. It could be people coming for different activities, walking, cycling, shooting, and golf, possibly, golf groups. Or anglers. I'm not sure you necessarily want this group staying with you, but there's a lot of fishing is very popular in Lincolnshire, a lot of fishing lakes. So that could be a market to be looking at. Dog owners, as I said earlier, a huge growth market currently. It could be people that are coming to have the night in the pub, eating and drinking with you, and then wanting to stay over. They don't necessarily want to go home. They don't want to worry about drink driving, so they'll stay overnight. Or they might be coming for an anniversary or a special celebration or an engagement or just a romantic night out, night away, or a group of friends coming to celebrate together and wanting to stay over, make a night of it. Contractors working in the area, or it could be the very tired businessman wanting somewhere to rest his weary head for the night. So a whole range of different markets. There's 1 or 2 others on that list to think about. Also tourers, so overseas visitors who are perhaps touring the country that might want to stop off for the night, or people coming for events, things like Lincoln Christmas Market, Cadwell Park Races, the 1940s weekend at Woodall Spa, Burley Horse Trials, Market Race and Race Courses, so a whole range of different events. Wedding guests, we didn't talk about weddings, but that could be a strong market, or people visiting friends and relatives. And also, it's not on the list for people coming for funerals as well. So all sorts of different markets. So just think about what is there in your area that might attract people. Also have a look at what the competition is doing. So in terms of deciding on your accommodation offer, a number of factors to consider. So first of all, the markets that you want to target. Once you're clear about who it is that you think you can attract to stay with you, you then need to work out, well, what type of accommodation are they going to want? How much might they want to pay? Do they want luxury? Do they want something more mid-range price? Obviously, the property that you've got and the site, and what can it lend itself to? What you can get planning permission for, and I think you will need planning permission for most of the things that you might want to do. Generally, you should be okay, I think. You might have difficulty if your building is listed. That might limit what you can do, or if you're in a conservation area, that might also limit the sorts of things you can get planning permission for. What level in the market that you want to go for, whether you want to go for something that's more mid-range or whether you want to go in at the luxury end of the market. Look at what competition you've got and what the competition is doing. And really you need to set yourself apart from that competition, so you don't necessarily want to duplicate what everybody else is doing. So have a look round, what other hotels, guest houses, B&Bs, pub accommodation is there in the area, and do your research. Have a good look at those, maybe go and visit them, stay in some of them. Look at their TripAdvisor reviews. Obviously, how much money you can afford is going to be a factor in terms of what you decide to do in terms of accommodation. And then finally, just think about the style and feel that you want to have. And I would say that the accommodation needs to reflect what you want to provide. It's your pub, it's your accommodation. So it's very much your own personal choice. And don't try and be something that you're not. Be true to yourself. And have accommodation that reflects your own personality and your own business. So key questions that you all want to know about, I'm sure, is how much can you earn from pub accommodation? So I'm just going to run through some figures here with you. So in terms of occupancy, if it was B&B rooms, guest rooms above or alongside the pub, in terms of your occupancy, you could probably be looking at between 50 and 75%. This is an annual occupancy for a stabilised year. It'll probably take you 2 or 3 years to build up to these levels. If you're very at the top end of the market, you could well be up to 80% occupancy. You will find that demand is going to be strongest at the weekend, so Friday and particularly Saturday, when generally you can expect to be full, certainly across the summer months. And then the summer months, again, I think you would see higher occupancy. It also depends where you're located. So if you're out towards the coast, you might well find that your occupancies are going to be lower because it's a more seasonal, leisure-driven market there, and there isn't the business demand or the contractor demand that can help to fill you during the week in the winter. So your occupancies might be lower if you're out towards the coast or you're in a very remote rural location. In terms of pricing, again, these are just average prices. So an average price for a sort of mid-range pub room currently would be about 80 to 90 pounds. And again, what I would suggest you need to do is to flex your rates according to strength of demand. So you would normally you'd go in with higher room rates at the weekend than midweek, and higher rates in the summer than the winter. But that gives you some idea. And then at the top end of the market, you could be up to 150, up to 200 pounds per night. And I'm now seeing the sort of really nice quality pub rooms coming in at, particularly on a Saturday night, probably selling at 250 pounds a night. So there is money to be made if you've got the right quality of offer. And then average daily rate is a figure that we think about in the accommodation sector. When you actually take out the VAT and the breakfast, that tells you how much money you're likely to make per room on a net basis. So 55 to 65 for a mid-range room, and over £100 for a luxury room. We move on, Charlotte. On top of those average daily rate figures, then you would then have breakfast. I think most people, not all people, but not all, will have breakfast with you. And average spend for breakfast, you can probably be charging up to about £10 now, maybe not quite that high, but £10. You could go higher if you want to offer a very high-end breakfast. And then a lot of the people staying with you will eat and drink with you. So that will depend very much on where you're located. It will depend on your menus, your prices, your reputation for food, your quality of food, and whether there's any competition, whether there are any alternative places for your staying guests to eat out in the evening. So you could be as high as 80%, 80, 90% of your staying guests actually eating with you and spending money on food and drink in the pub in the evening. And then in terms of a net profit rate for a pub room, I say think about 30 to 40%. That's incorporating the spend on food and drink as well, and the profits that you make on food and drink. So we can move on. So that, combining all of those figures, it suggests that you, for a mid-range pub room, you could be making about £8,000 per year per room, and for something more boutique or luxury, up to 15,000. So that's a decent level of income that you can be earning from offering accommodation. And those are just some indicative costs. I mean, obviously these vary quite significantly, and you'll need to do your own work to cost out whatever it is you're looking at. But you can see there the spread. Obviously, if it's refurbishing upper floor rooms, that would be a much cheaper than a new build extension or converting outbuildings. And then ensuite pod rooms are somewhere in the middle. But if you think, if you think that you could potentially make £8,000 to £15,000 per room, depending on what level you go in at, it wouldn't take you too long to get your money back. So, I think it is a profitable option to be thinking about accommodation. But obviously, this is subject to you doing a lot more detailed work. So in terms of glamping, occupancy levels wouldn't be as high for glamping. Glamping is much more seasonal. It's also very weekend focused. So you should achieve very high occupancies between April and October, generally full, I would say, at weekends. And summer occupancy is okay, but when we come to the winter, then occupancy is much lower, depending on the type of glamping unit. If you have it's a canvas glamping unit, probably not going to have much business at all in the winter. And then you can see there the prices that you can potentially charge per night for the different types of glamping unit. And glamping is more profitable, so the net profit ratio 45 to 65%. So you haven't got quite so much cost in terms of operating a glamping business. And then in terms of those are how the numbers work out in potential annual income. So 4,500 for a bell tent, up to 16,000 for a really nice shepherd's hut. And those are an indication of potential costs. So, I mean, you could do a glamping business quite cheaply, really, if you just wanted to go into bell tents, sort of nicely presented bell tents. That wouldn't cost you that much. You can actually hire bell tents for the season if you just wanted to do that. If you wanted to go put your toe in the water, whereas if you're going up to a shepherd's hut, we're talking of 35 to up to 50, 55,000 if you go for a double unit shepherd's hut. So, but again, if you think back to the potential money that you can earn, you could quite quickly get your money back by investing in a glamping operation. And a campsite, camping, as I'm sure you'll be aware, it's very seasonal, very weekend focused again. So your summer occupancies will be pretty good, particularly at the weekends, bank holidays. But over the course of the year, you're probably only going to do about 30–40% occupancy. You probably charge about £20–25 a pitch. So your annual income per pitch is about £2,000 once you've taken out some of the operating costs. So that's not a huge amount, but it's something and it depends on the scale, the size of the campsite you want to develop. What I would say though is that you need a reasonably large campsite to justify investment in a toilet and shower block before it starts to stack up for you. And then a motorhome stopover, slightly higher occupancy, 40 to 60%. Again, it's still seasonal, and depending on the level of facilities you offer, and particularly whether you offer electric hookup and include that in the price, you could be charging £15 to £25, generating about £3,000 from a motorhome stopover pitch, and you wouldn't necessarily need to spend a huge amount of money on that. So again, that's a good way of earning some additional income. And I say motorhoming is growing. So before I finish, just a couple of quick words on planning and building regulations. I'm not a planner. We do have Ian on the call who can answer questions about planning. I think you will need, certainly if you're looking at upper floor bedrooms, you may need change of use permission, depending on what that permission, those upper floors currently have permission for. So you might need change of use permission, and you probably will also need building regulations if you're converting an upper floor space. You definitely need planning permission and building regulations if you are converting out buildings and looking at a new build extension or addition. If you're looking at a campsite, you can actually operate a campsite, a temporary campsite, for 28 days without planning permission. Currently, that's gone up to 56 days during the recovery, the post-COVID recovery. I don't know how long that will continue for. But if you just wanted to operate a seasonal campsite in the peak season, that's a potential option to consider. Whereas if you want to go for a permanent campsite, you will then need planning permission and also a site license. I think the same applies for glamping as well. Not quite clear what the situation is for motorhome stopovers. Don't think you would need planning for those, but Ian might be able to tell us that. And then in terms of securing planning permission, I think my advice would be to talk to your planning department at the earliest opportunity. Most planning departments will offer pre-application advice. I think there's usually a charge for that, but it makes sense to go in and talk to the planners, tell them what you're thinking of doing, and identify whether there are any potential planning hurdles that you weren't aware of. I say also consult with your neighbours from the outset and the local community. What you don't want to do is find that you get to the point of submitting your planning application and then there's a whole load of objections to it and it doesn't get through. So I think it's worth talking to people, telling them what you're doing, and hopefully the local community will support you, because if you're adding accommodation, it's strengthening your pub, it's making it more viable, it's keeping it for the local community. And prepare your case, but also seek advice from a professional planning consultant. It is it's something that most people don't necessarily experience very often, so I would say use a professional. And then just a final slide from me before we open up for questions. It's just about legal issues. I'm afraid to say there's a whole set of legislation that you'll need to comply with. I'm sure you already comply with lots of legislation in running the pub and the restaurant. But there's a whole raft of other legislation that you also need to comply with if you're providing accommodation. What I would recommend is that you get hold of a copy of something called the Pink booklet, which you can get through Visit Britain. And at the end of the presentation, there's a link to the Visit Britain Business Advice website, and you can buy the Pink booklet through there. It's only £12.49, but it tells you everything you need to know about all of the legislation you'll need to comply with. So you'll need to be thinking about booking terms and conditions, and I think certainly at the moment think about cancellation policies. GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, so you'll need to think about how you're going to store and protect the personal details of the guests that will be staying with you. You will need to comply with the Disability Discrimination Act, which I'm sure you're already complying with that from the pub side, but you'll need to make sure that you've taken all reasonable steps to ensure that your accommodation is accessible for disabled guests. And that's not just people in wheelchairs, that could be people with lesser mobility difficulties, but also people with sensory impairment, whether that's sight loss or hearing loss or cognitive ability. So it could be guests with dementia or learning difficulties. So you will need to be thinking about all of that and show and demonstrate that you've thought about that. You will have responsibility for your guests' luggage and belongings under the Hotel Proprietors Act 1956. And you'll also need to do a fire risk assessment for accommodation. I think in terms of fire safety precautions and fire escapes, things like that, those should all be covered under your building regulations. I think, as I understand it, you'll need to have at least 2 escape routes from the accommodation in the case of fire. But yeah, you'll need to definitely look at that, and also you'll need to ensure the safety of any electrical equipment that you include in the bedroom, so things like kettles and hair dryers and irons. So you need to do a PAT test on those. But I say have a look at the Pink booklet. That will give you all the information that you need to be thinking about. So I think that moves us to completes my presentation. I think we've got some time for questions before we move on to Chris from Bateman's.
Many thanks, Andrew, for all that information. It's like a great opportunity, and there's plenty of advice and support there available to help our listeners should they be considering to go down this route. As Andrew said, we're now going to take a few questions before we move on to the next presentation. Just a reminder that you can still submit your questions through the question pane in the attendee control panel, or you can ask them directly to our presenters by clicking the raise your hand button. That again is located on the control panel. As Andrew mentioned, Ian Carrington is joining us today on the call. He's the planning officer for East Lindsey District Council. So if we could just ask Ian, here he is, to join us, that's perfect. Thank you very much. And I'll just have a look to see what questions we've got coming through at the moment. Okay, we have a planning one to start with for you, Ian. So, are the policies in Lincolnshire's local plans supportive of developing pub accommodation?
Yes, emphatically, they are, is the short answer. I'll give you a slightly longer one. And I'll then go back, because not everything may need planning permission, but where you do need planning permission, yes. Everything, if you remember those old-fashioned nesting tables where one table's fitted inside another, planning is a little bit like that. So national planning policy is extremely strong on encouraging economic development and economic growth, and all the local plans in Lincolnshire have to fit within that. So every local plan in Lincolnshire, although they will differ a little in terms of detail, very much so, we're all trying to encourage and facilitate economic growth. So this is a kind of development of existing businesses, of pub businesses. In broad terms, that is exactly what we're trying to encourage. There may be some cases where for some pubs, particularly if you're talking about development of accommodation inside an existing pub building, because accommodation is sometimes considered an ancillary use for fairly obvious historical reasons, you may not perhaps actually need planning permission. But as Andrew said earlier, always check with your local planning team.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that, Ian. And we have another question here that's come in, maybe one for Andrew to deal with here. Do I need to have a star rating or grading for my pub accommodation?
If you're talking, so we're talking really here about the official star rating. So Visit England have a star rating scheme, and the AA has a star rating scheme. And accommodation businesses can be graded under both of those. And I would say you don't necessarily need it in the current market. I think you'll find, yeah, people do still take note of star ratings, but I think they probably take more notice of TripAdvisor reviews when they're trying to assess the quality of accommodation. And also most of the online travel agents, things like sites like Booking.com, they have their own star rating scheme. So that means you don't necessarily need to be star rated under the official scheme. There are some reasons why you might want to think about going for star rated, though. It's actually quite helpful, particularly if you're new to accommodation, to be inspected independently. So to actually have the inspectors to come in and assess your property, and they're very good. They give lots of advice. So it's actually the advisory aspect of the inspection visit, which is probably as important, if it's not important, as the star rating that you actually get. So that's one reason why you might want to go down the star rating route. I think the other reason is that you can get special accolades from star rating. So you could be a 3-star gold or a 4-star silver property, or there's also a breakfast award. And it's those sort of accolades that I think are helpful in terms of setting you apart from the competition. And I know when I talk to accommodation businesses that have got those accolades, they're always very proud of them. So that's another reason. So I'd say you don't necessarily need to do it, but it could be beneficial. And you also need to weigh up, there's a cost. So you need to weigh up how much it's going to cost before you actually go down that route.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I have another question coming here. What are the additional costs for regulations, particularly for listed buildings?
Was that one for me, or?
Yes, Ian, if you can help with that, or I don't know.
Additional costs. Does the question mean in terms of permissions that you require?
Just 1 second, I can see if in terms of fire regulations.
Not quite a planning matter, but the building control team at your local council should be able to help, I'd have said, wouldn't you, Andrew?
Yeah, it's building regulations, isn't it, that would cover fire safety.
Okay, all right, so that's fine. Okay, we've got one further question here. Andrew, you did talk about marketing during your presentation. How do I work out who my customers might be for the pub accommodation?
Okay, that's a good question. Yeah, I suppose there's a number of things that you can do, sort of practical steps. So you could certainly look at what's in your area. So what is there in the area that's likely to attract people that might want to stay? You know, what attractions have you got? What events are there that go on? Is there a golf course where people might be coming to play, or fishing lakes, or is there a wedding venue? Are there wedding venues in the area that might generate demand for weddings? So I think that's a starting point, really. Think about what is there in the area that might entice people to come and stay. I would suggest talk to your existing customers. You know, maybe the people that are coming to eat and drink with you. Ask them if they would ever think about staying overnight, or ask them whether they might want to put up their visitors with you when they're coming to stay. Definitely look at the competition. I think that's a really good thing to do anyway. But actually, if you spend time looking at TripAdvisor reviews, that also very often you'll learn why people have stayed. So they'll often say, "Oh, I stayed for Mum's 90th birthday," or "I stopped off en route to come see Lincoln Cathedral." So that gives you a bit of insight as well. And also, it's very interesting to check out the competition, and you definitely need to do that. Talk to local businesses to see whether they have any visitors, any demand that they might want to stay with you. And also talk to your local tourism officer. So all of the local authorities have a tourism officer. They should have some insight into the local market for accommodation in their area. They may well have research as well that they can share with you. So yeah, those are the sort of practical steps that I would suggest taking to try and research your market.
Okay, great, thank you. I've got a comment here. It seems that the current approach to business rates is a deterrent to improving a property for accommodation, as business rates will increase and will not necessarily be based on realised income. That's a bit of a worry from viewers' point of view.
Yes, I don't know how we can respond to that. We could do with somebody from the valuation office on the call, but yeah, business rates is an issue. I know the sector has been lobbying for something to be done on that, but yeah, it is a potential barrier. I understand that.
Okay. Great, thank you. One for Ian now, please. Do you need planning for temporary accommodation?
The difficult answer is sometimes and sometimes not. As Andrew was saying earlier on, there are some derogations which would allow, for example, a temporary campsite. And as part of the coronavirus response, at the moment, those have been increased from 28 to, I think, 56 days. Whether those regulations will be kept going is a matter that government is discussing. At the moment, they're very keen to encourage. So that does exist. But it all depends on how you define things. So again, I would just say to everybody, your local planning office is there to help and not hinder, but it's wise to check first just to make sure you're on the right side of the regulations. But in principle, the answer is yes.
Great, thank you. And just to add on to that, do you need planning for accommodation that only operates seasonally?
Yes, you do. If it requires planning permission in the first place, whether it's seasonally restricted or all year round, and obviously we're trying to encourage tourism all year round wherever we can. But no, if it needs permission, it needs permission.
That's lovely. Great, thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of the questions for section. So thank you very much, Ian and Andrew. Thank you. We'll now move on to the next presentation. So next up is Chris Jones, who will be providing us with insights into this opportunity from Bateman's perspective. Chris is the Profit Partnership Manager for George Bateman and Son Limited, the fourth generation Lincolnshire family brewer. His role is to lead the team of 48 self-employed pub tenants, assisting them with developing their businesses to maximise their profit opportunities. So I'll now pass over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks, Juliet. Good afternoon, everyone. Juliet stole my first line there. My name's Chris Jones, and I am the Profit Partnership Manager for Bateman's Brewery. My main role is to work with our self-employed business operators, because all our pubs, with one exception, are run by individual self-employed people. No two pub is the same. Every pub has a different set of challenges and opportunities. And it's my role to try and tie that together, working with our licensees so that they can optimize their income. But the main purpose of me speaking today is to provide you really with an active illustration of how Bateman's is planning and indeed actually creating new ways of exploiting the opportunity that the post-pandemic boom in staycations and visitors is generating in Lincolnshire. I think we've all felt that the pandemic has brought some quite unique challenges, both personally and professionally, since March 2020. And we've all been investing time and money since then in the challenges. Perhaps now is the time to think about the glass being half full and look at what some of the opportunities might be as we move forward and the vaccination programme gains even more pace and we move towards the new norm, whatever that might be. Andrew's highlighted what the opportunities are, so I don't propose to go back over them in any great detail, but there's no doubt that there will be more visitors into Lincolnshire in 2021, 22, 23, and that Bateman's as a company and our business operators will be as prepared as we possibly can be to capitalise on that. The people who are on the call who are our business operators will be probably quite familiar with my use of cliches. And I've titled this presentation The Third Income Stream. And I often talk to licensees about how pubs can move away from the traditional food and drink and look at a third opportunity. Over the years, for many of them, it may have just been the income from fruit machines or pool tables, which were far stronger in the days before COVID and restrictions, and also in the days before the anti-gambling lobby grew. But still, that third income opportunity does exist, and we believe it comes from this explosion of new visitors into Lincolnshire. So I'll just give you a bit of background about ourselves for the people who may not be too familiar with Bateman's or who just simply know the name but not necessarily what we do. We're a fourth generation family business based in the town of Wainfleet. We've been working as a brewery since the 1870s, and we're led by two members of the Bateman family, Stuart and Jackie, brother and sister. And initially the business was set up in the 1870s to provide beer for the thirsty farming community. Some people would say we're a bit old-fashioned. I prefer to say that we're a traditional business. We have very strong values. We value very much the people we work with. That's why we are a tenanted business rather than a managed business. People are at the heart of what we do. And I suppose the strongest link with tradition is that we brew exclusively cask-conditioned real ales, beers on hand pump. Our pub estate is now 49 pubs, 48 of which are run, as I said earlier, by self-employed people. One pub we operate ourselves for a reason linked to this presentation, which is because it has a large caravan park linked to it. And the majority of our estate is based in Lincolnshire. What we also have is a strong and growing free trade business, so that we would be working with people who maybe operate a bar on a campsite, or they may be a rugby club or a restaurant, or indeed just a village free house. But we have over 500 of those customers, and we equally value their contribution to our business. Whether they're free trade or tide trade, obviously the business entered some very dark waters in March 2020, when pubs were forced to close, and indeed all pubs closed from March till July the 4th, and then again from early November through till April the 12th, and they were allowed to open outdoors only, and then indoors from the 17th of May. And just to give you an indication of the severity of that, Bateman's Brewery had never previously closed. Through 2 world wars, it remained open, and through the previous major pandemic of the Spanish flu, it never closed. But such was the severity of this pandemic that we were forced to close and briefly cease brewing. But we didn't just remain dormant. Our business had to think about the future still. So we made sure, first and foremost, that we were protecting the businesses of our tenants, or business operators, as we call them. So we provided them with substantial rent concessions to enable them to come out of this with us at the end. But we've also been in regular contact, whether it's pastoral help, simple conversations with people, or technical advice and guidance to tenants and free trade alike. We included all our communications that went to tenants also went to free trade, so that we could give people advice on financial matters, operational matters, legislative matters as things changed throughout the pandemic, and to make sure that when the periods when they were allowed to open, as indeed they are now, that they do so in a COVID-safe manner. And we coined a phrase when we had our first senior management meeting on account of the pandemic on the 16th of March 2020, that the brewery would go into a 3-stage process: survive, revive, and develop. And we go along that with our tenants hand in hand, and that throughout the pandemic, we sought to keep everybody in survival mode. And gradually, we begin to revive as the roadmap unwinds, and whilst we're disappointed with the 4-week delay till July, we understand why. But as restrictions have eased, we've brewed more beer. We've got all the pubs open, even though, albeit we do accept that pubs are on a reduced capacity, and that sometimes less can be more and will be as we go ahead. People just want good service, and that's what we aim to do. But probably we're now getting to the stage where we can look at develop, and that's what brings us to the pub accommodation aspect of how we are going to diversify on our business. Have the next slide, please, Charlotte. Okay, so as we move to the development stage, we had to have a vision for what we thought the business would look like going forward. We will still brew beer. We'll still own pubs. We may sell more beer online. We may do more activity with our pubs that's based around safety. But we'll look to expand the estate as well. But the one thing we'll do that for us as a business is completely different and new, and that's been triggered by the marketplace, is to look to exploit this opportunity of staycations and develop something new and a new arm to our business. Then I did a bit of work looking at some of the numbers that we wanted to discuss as a senior management team moving forward, and a few things stood out to me, which I put in the bullet points on that slide, that according to an article I read on TripAdvisor called "A Shot in the Arm for Travel," which I thought was a good title, which is why I read it in the first place, said that 44% of adults in Britain would prefer to holiday in Britain, versus only 26% wanted to go abroad in 2021. And as Andrew said, a lot of the insight into holidays in Britain in the years ahead is that people will stay for longer, they will spend more, and most importantly, the experience of being somewhere different, somewhere a little bit special, will be quite important to them. And in past years, I've been to many business meetings held at Boston College and Chamber of Commerce and so on, and every single time I'm told that there's a chronic shortage of letting rooms in Boston, and one of Andrew's earlier slides showed that. He said 6% of the whole accommodation in Lincolnshire is in Boston. On the positive side, record sales of camper vans at the moment. In Lincolnshire, there's 25,000 caravans, 350 campsites. All of this led Batemans to believe that this is the area that we need to explore to react in a post-COVID manner. And looking at the demand and the impact of quarantine, we thought we'd explore a little bit more on cottages, letting rooms, caravans, motorhome parking and camping. So can I have the next slide, please, Charlotte? Sorry, can you move on a slide? Thank you. Thank you. So what we've done that's completely new is we've set up our own new arm to the business, which solely provides holiday accommodation and holiday lets for people looking to visit Lincolnshire. It's all based at our head office in Wainfleet, and we will operate this ourselves. We've already started, so we're looking at converting buildings that we own, all sorts of different buildings throughout the area around Wainfleet and Skegness and Burle Marsh and so on, and converting them into good quality accommodation. And we also have the holiday park that I mentioned earlier with caravans on at Croft, which we've expanded with planning permission for more pitches. And we're investing both in the buildings and bringing in a whole new team, creating new jobs in Wainfleet for people to work on this arm of the business. And the photos at the bottom there that you can see, the first two are holiday cottages that some people might recognise on the entrance to the brewery. Previously, they were just private lets to people, but now they are converted, as you can see from the middle photo, into holiday style accommodation. And they're the first three there that we have converted and are ready for use. And in that first photo, you can see just behind the historic windmill at the brewery, which is set on several floors. One of the interesting projects that we're looking at developing along with heritage is whether that would be suitable for a very high quality, a very unusual holiday let going forward. So we are committed to develop our business and exploit this opportunity. Can you move on, please, Charlotte? As I mentioned earlier, the other part of our business is what we call the Profit Partnership Department, our pub division. So we don't want to just try and exploit this third income stream as a business for Bateman's. We want to help our business owners to do the same. So we're looking at many opportunities to help people to develop and add the type of accommodation offer that Andrew has outlined in his presentation. Whether it's a pub that already has rooms or caravan facilities or camping facilities, and we want to drive the business there with those people, or look at pubs that don't have the provision but have potential for the provision of rooms or camping or caravans, that we want to try and help develop so that our tenants can exploit this third income stream and generate extra business. And just an illustration of that is that I took a phone call one day from a lady, and I thought I'd misheard because she said she was from Campra, and I thought she said Canberra, but it actually was Campra, which is the campaign for real heirs. I never knew what an heir was, but I now am reliably informed it's a bit like vacuum cleaners we all refer to as hoovers. Well, we probably refer to overnight camping as Brit stops, when the actual term is an heir, is an area where people can park their motorhome overnight, typically in existing pub car parks. And that's a market we very much want to tap into, working with Campra and follow a model that the French have developed with working with local governments as well, quite successfully, to provide people with information on websites as to where they can park and then spend money in the pub in return for being able to park there overnight. Andrew outlined some of the areas that pubs have that can then be converted into letting rooms, whether it's disused spaceable pubs or whether it's barn conversions or whatever. But we can do that jointly investing with our business owners. Most pubs have large beer gardens, hopefully, or car parks, and we can work with them. And again, Ian and Andrew mentioned about planning. One of the key things we're keen to do is keep everything to a reasonable, manageable size, so that some of the professional organisations like the Caravan and Camping Club or Campra can actually apply for exemption certificates on behalf of our tenants. So there's no planning needed, but it typically means that the size of the number of units on any plot is restricted to sort of 5 or 6, but at least it means that the exemption certificates cover planning. Next slide, please, Charlotte. So I just wanted to try and give you an illustration of what we're doing, which will benefit our licensees, and how the finance aspect of it works, because I guess most people feel apprehensive, particularly after the tough time that we know publicans have had through the pandemic, or whether capital outlay at this present moment in time is the right thing to do. But typically when an investment is made in a pub, the licensee will provide the fixtures and fittings, and the pub company would fund the main works. People are often worried about, well, what would that mean to my rent? So I just put a little illustration there of what it would work with Bateman's as an illustration. That if we were to invest 10,000, or for every 10,000 we invest, we look at a 15% recharge in rent to our licensees. If you break that down, it's only £28.85 per week for every 10,000 spent. And from the figures you've seen from Andrew's presentation, that's comfortably less than the average spend for one night. And indeed, in camper vans, Camper told me that the average spend per head of their members, and they have 22,000 members, is £51 per night when they stay at a pub. Equally, a 20,000 investment will be £58 per week, and Andrew's slide illustrated that's the profit from one room. So this is affordable if people work with the brewery. But we also have two other options. The first option I put there is the capital investment agreement, which is something innovative that we do. Without going into any huge detail, that's where the licensee would fund the agreement. But working with the licensee and their accountant, we would set a turnover figure for the business that we would review after 2 years. For whatever percentage of that turnover figure that the pub has achieved, we would then pay back that investment. So if the pub had achieved 95% of the target, we would repay the licensee 95% of his investment, his or her investment. If the pub had achieved 120% of the target, then we would refund the licensee's investment plus 20%. Typically, that type of agreement works at the start of a tenancy when people are new and they have their ideas. But it's an alternative. And the other alternative I've not actually put on the slide, but it is part of Bateman's contractual arrangement with licensees, is that if licensees invest their own money in an investment scheme, we commit that we will not change the contractual rent in perpetuity. Unlike other companies, the next rent review would then add on the benefit of new facilities. We would never do that. And just a couple of other things that we do that I think it's important, and Andrew mentioned it, about the marketing activity, so that if we did an investment scheme, we wouldn't purely work on the provision of the rooms or the camper van sites. We would also help with the marketing angle. So we have preferential rates with a business called stayinthepub.com, which is actually part of CAMRA, the Campaign for Real Ale. And we also have a company called Inner Pub, who provide excellent pub websites, which have marketing activity and links to booking facilities as well, so that licensees will be able to hit the ground running with their rooms. Okay, my final slide, please, Charlotte. So just in short and in summary, we agree with everything that's been said previously about the expanding market, and that we're a Lincolnshire business. We want to tap into that market. And if anybody on the call needed some reassurance or convincing that this is the right thing to do, well, Bateman's has made its commitment and stepped into that market itself. And also we're committed to help our business owners to try and seek out these new opportunities. And we're even going one step further, as I mentioned earlier, with looking at some very unique buildings that we own that could provide some really high quality, quirky accommodation. And we're fully investigating glamping pods, and we've had our first pipeline of planning permissions granted for glamping pods, with probably the first one happening at the Mill in Boston. And if I could just leave you with a really positive story, the two photos at the bottom are of the Carpenter's Arms in Boston, which is a really unique, fantastic pub, well worth a visit. Our licensees there invested their money in converting the upstairs, which you can probably see from the photo on the left is quite substantial, into 6 really high quality letting rooms that you can see on the right hand side. Their development, their vision, we've supported them with structural work, but they saw this a year ago and have moved quickly on it, and will reap the benefits as this market expands. So I thought I'd leave you with that really positive illustration of how pubs can develop accommodation in a profitable way. So thank you for listening, and I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that insight, Chris. Really interesting to hear how things are developing now. I can't see any questions come in as yet, and I'm quite conscious of the time. So I think it's probably best if we move on to Sarah's presentation. If there are any questions, please just pop them into the question pane, and we'll see if we've got a chance at the end to respond to those. If not, we will do that post the webinar. So I would just now like to, okay, thank you, Chris. I'd just like to now introduce our presenter, which is Sarah Grundy, and she has worked in the Historic Places team at Lincolnshire County Council for 26 years in several different roles. Her current role is very varied and includes developing and supporting initiatives that protect and promote the historic. So she's just going to give us a little bit of an insight into the Inns on the Edge scheme. So over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. Can you hear me all right? Hope you can. And thanks ever so much. Thanks ever so much for the opportunity to talk a bit about the Inns on the Edge project. It's being funded by Historic England and delivered by the team that I work in, the Historic Places team at Lincolnshire County Council. I'm sure it won't come as a surprise to any of you that Lincolnshire has an awful lot of historic pubs of all shapes and sizes in many different locations and from all different periods. Now, by historic for this project, we mean all pubs built before the 1970s, because we were very keen to include housing estate pubs. So like churches, pubs have been at the heart of our communities for many, many years and continue to be so, and they are often the busy hubs of the social life of communities. Yet as a heritage asset, as they're known in the heritage world, we know surprisingly little about them. So how many are there? Where are they? What's their condition like? What are their unique stories? How have they changed? And what does their future look like? Next slide, please. So what inspired this project? Well, as I'm sure you're all acutely aware, and has been mentioned already, many pubs have been under pressure for many years now as businesses, and this has been made worse by COVID. And wherever the businesses have to close, it also puts the historic buildings themselves at risk. So that could be from unsympathetic conversion, or they could fall into dereliction or even become demolished. And they are an irreplaceable resource. So once they're gone, they're gone. And we want pubs to remain open as pubs. So this example here is in Sturton by Stowe, and it's not listed. It's changed a great deal over the years, but it was found to have lots of older elements, such as a 17th century roof structure in one part of the building. So it turns out that it was probably, apart from the church, the oldest building in the village, and it was well loved. However, we didn't know about it until it had already been granted planning permission to be demolished. So sadly, the pub was demolished in 2019, but we were able to record it. Next slide, please. So this really raised our awareness of this type of building. So the non-listed buildings, these heritage assets, are not well recorded, especially in the historic environment record, which is run by our team. So the historic environment record is a record of archaeology, historic buildings, including listed buildings, historic landscapes and settlements across the whole of the county, and also including local legends. And it covers the period right from the earliest prehistoric to the 20th century. And we'll be giving you the link to the online database that you can have a look at later on. But some of the pubs are listed buildings, so have protection under the law, but the vast majority don't, because they've been altered so much over the years to cater for changing tastes with their clientele. So they don't always meet the standards required for listing. So even though they may not be as well recognised and valued and cherished heritage as much as, say, churches and stately homes, they're certainly of huge value to their communities for their social, cultural and intangible history. And they all tell unique stories about themselves and the communities that they serve. Next slide, please. So there are many reasons why historic pubs matter, in addition to those I've already mentioned. They're places where people come together for a whole host of reasons. They're important in all places, and particularly in rural communities, where most or all of other services have disappeared. They're good for the local economy as well, so providing local employment and promoting local food and drink, providing accommodation, and good quality, characterful pubs can increase the value of housing locally as well. There is evidence to support that. Next slide, please. So as has been previously mentioned, historic pubs are under threat. And here are some stark statistics about the risk to our pubs. So 1 in 5 rural pubs closed since 2000. 10,000 more pubs closed permanently because of the pandemic in 2020. A survey in November last year found that 70% of pubs were at risk of closure in 2021. And there's been an increase in inquiries and planning applications around change of use and demolition, as the sites of pubs and the buildings themselves make them very attractive for residential development and for convenience stores. Next slide, please. So the Historic Places team, we've decided to try and do something to support our locals, and we're going to be working, as I mentioned before, in partnership with Historic England. So we're running a pilot project along the Lincolnshire coast from Grimsby to Boston to research and record our historic pubs. So that's in urban and rural in towns like Grimsby and Boston, and the smaller villages like Croft and Hogsthorpe, and the seaside resorts like Skegness and Cleethorpes. Next slide, please. So why did we choose this area? Well, there's so much happening already along the coast. So there are initiatives such as the application from Lincolnshire County Council and partners to Natural England to recognise the area as a heritage coast, which is a very special description, and we'll have branding with that we can attract more tourists and become more well known as a unique coastline. There's been major investment via the town deals in Boston, Grimsby, Mablethorpe and Skegness. And we've also got quite a lot of investment through heritage-led regeneration, particularly through the National Lottery and through Historic England and the Heritage Action Zones and Townscape Heritage projects. And last year, I believe it was last year, was meant to be the year of the coast in England, to celebrate all things coastal in England, but because of the pandemic, it's been moved back a couple of years. And there are also lots of opportunities to enhance and diversify the existing tourism offer. So, for instance, the England Coastal Path is being opened up in sections along the coast, and there's a new nature reserve being developed by the National Trust at the former Sandylands Golf Course. And we have creative projects going on via Boston, via Transported and through Magna Vitae, through the Creative People and Place investment from the Arts Council. So there will be opportunities to link up with that kind of initiative. Next slide, please. Also, pubs are closely linked with the development of the coast and the coastal resorts. So we want to understand how pubs fit with the changes of the last few hundred years. And the Vine is a particularly important, significant heritage asset that's been advertising its sea bathing since 1784. And there was also lots of competition to cater for the new visitors to the new resorts, resulting in pubs such as the Ship Hotel in Skegness. And of course, as Chris has already mentioned, Wainfleet is home to Bateman's Brewery, which also has a large network of pubs across the area, and we're very happy to be working with them on the project. So we're keen to know more about how heritage contributes to the success of pubs as businesses, and how we can support businesses to make the most of their heritage. So this could be through identifying old photographs, maybe making the most of architectural features, traditional games, local stories, traditional recipes, and that sort of thing. And this is the kind of thing that perhaps we can help with the wow factor that Andrew mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to share quickly an example of a derelict historic pub that has been rescued and brought back into use as a bed and breakfast, cafe, community hub and residential unit. So it's a listed building and it was built around 1599 in the Fenland artisan mannerist style. So it became derelict and was in a really terrible state and it needed an awful lot of work doing to it. Next slide, please. So it was taken on by Heritage Trust Lincolnshire Local Building Preservation Trust in 2016. And over the last 5 years, they've raised around about £2.5 million. So they can bring it back into use. And this is the vision that they had for the building itself, its outbuildings and surroundings. Next slide, please. And this is the Old King's Head today. So it's only just reopened. They do have a website that is 50% there, I'm told. So they still have to populate some of the information on there and put some more photographs on. But you can find more information about the project itself on the Heritage Lincolnshire website, and we'll be sharing the link to that later as well. So anyone who wants to know more about how to research your pub or learn more about the heritage of the pub, please do get in touch. And you can also check out the Historic Environment Record website and the links to the past website, which we'll be giving you the links to. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for that interesting presentation. It's great to see how the Old King's Head have turned the property around. It looks amazing now. So that's brilliant. I am having a look and I can't see any questions that have come through at the moment. So again, due to timing, I'm suggesting that we move on, Sarah, and have the final comments come through from Andrew and the next steps. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, thank you very much to Chris and to Sarah. I'm just going to wrap up. I'm conscious of time, and I'm guessing some of you might need to get back into the pubs with the football on tonight. So anyway, I think we'll just wrap this up with just a short section, a couple of things I wanted to conclude on, really. The first is about standing out from the crowd. And I think if you're going to provide accommodation in your pub, or you're already doing it, then I think you need to be aware that you're going to be competing in a very competitive market. So you're going to be competing with all of the hotels and guest houses and B&Bs and other pub accommodation businesses in your area, but you're also competing with all of those types of businesses across the whole country, indeed, if not across the whole world. So it's a hugely competitive market, and you need to be thinking about, well, how can you make yourself stand out from the crowd? How can you be heard? How can you get your business known? What do you want to be known for? How can you get your customers talking about the experience they've had with you and sharing that experience and helping to build the business? So there's just a number of thoughts here, really, in terms of things you might think about, in terms of how you might make yourself stand out. I haven't got a circle for heritage, so there should be a heritage one there, and heritage, that might be something you might want to focus on. But also your service, you want to be famous for excellent service, for your food. Do you want to be contemporary or traditional or luxury or quirky? Is there some sort of wow factor that you can build in? Do you want to go dog friendly? Is that something you want to focus on, or activity friendly? So there's all sorts of different things that you could think about. If we run on to the next slide, Charlotte. So these are just some thoughts, and I'll just run through these, and I've got some images to try and illustrate them. So you might want to think about your decor and your individual decor, and I think there is very much a move towards contemporary and individual interior decor to set businesses apart and give you something different and something of real quality. Depending on the market you're aiming for, you might want to go for feature baths. So if you're particularly wanting to attract couples for romantic getaways, you might want nice roll top baths. You might want to go for hot tubs. I know there's a pub, it's the Hooble on Arms near Grantham, where they've got hot tub rooms, and I've come across other pubs that are offering hot tub rooms, and you'd be amazed how well they do. They always do extremely well in terms of occupancy, and they can actually charge quite a significant premium. Saunas is another potential option, but I think hot tubs is the one really to go for. You might want to think about whether you can work with a local beautician to offer spa treatments and massages. Obviously, it depends whether you've got the space. Think about going green. I said earlier that there's real concern now for climate change, and people are seeking out accommodation that's got really good green credentials. So hopefully, you would want to do all of that sort of stuff anyway. But if you're really going there, you could look at something called the Green Tourism Business Scheme. So that's a sort of kite marking scheme to demonstrate that you are very green in terms of the way you operate your business. But also think about other sort of aspects to improve the environmental sustainability of your business. Things like a welcome basket. Again, it's just those little things that just people maybe hadn't expected and delights them. I used a couple of examples. So last year, I went away with a family to, it was a holiday cottage in Wales, and we arrived and there was a cake there waiting for us, a homemade cake, and it was still warm and it smelled wonderful. It was just such a warm welcome, lovely welcome. And I've just been away from my wife for a week in Devon and to a holiday cottage again. And when we arrived there was a beautiful basket of fruit on the table waiting for us. And it's those little things that we hadn't expected it, but it was just very memorable. Think about quirky features, but that could be just in terms of your interior design. If you really want to attract walkers and cyclists, maybe think about stocking walks, books and maps, bike storage, bike hire. You could have a few bikes for hire. You could team up with a local cycle hire company. Things like drying rooms. It's those sorts of things that think about what your walkers and cyclists would need, or if it's anglers, then they would probably want somewhere to store their bait in there, maybe even their catch. If you're going into dog market, dog-friendly market, think about maybe dog washing facilities, dog treats, I've seen pubs offering menus with dog treats, doggy ice cream, prosecco, all sorts of stuff that you can do to really make the dogs feel welcome. Maybe think about sort of food and drink tasting. You may do those things already, but perhaps whether you can look at packaging those up with your accommodation and market those. Also, live music's always attractive, but if you've got live music on, you might want to be specifically marketing that to people that would want to come and enjoy the live music and then stay over and really make a whole night of it and a whole experience with you. But look at working with local businesses. How can you support each other? That could be local artists, how you can display their art. And also think about visitor information. You'd be surprised how many people turn up for a holiday or a break and actually haven't done any research to think about what they're going to do while they stay. So that they are looking for their accommodation business to help them, and they're looking very often for that visitor information once they've arrived. So there are things that you could be thinking about doing there. So if we just move the slides on, Charlotte, I'll just run through these images. So that's just some examples of interior designs. It's very much about making the interior design specific to your accommodation, give you something a little bit different. Those are the ideas of the sort of luxury baths, the roll top baths. Moving on, Charlotte. Hot tubs, as I mentioned, or maybe saunas. Those are the ideas. There's the welcome packs, welcome baskets, could be homemade biscuits, could be obviously some nice bottles of Bateman's beer, the local sort of is it Piper's Crisp that come from Lincolnshire? So anything that's sort of local. Plenty of different walks books that you can stock, or cycle route maps. And if you do that, make sure you do tell your guests that you have all of that stuff for them when they arrive. Those are some ideas. So there's the dog wash facilities that you might want to look at, or the doggy treat menus, dog beds, different things that you can do to really welcome dogs. Visitor leaflet racks. There is a system, I think, in Lincolnshire. I think Visit Lincolnshire run it, where you can have these racks which will have leaflets. So you could do in-room folders, but if you're doing those, make sure you do them well. Those are some ideas for sort of evenings. So it might be beer tasting, cocktail making, gin tasting, cheese tasting, working with a local cheesery. Again, developing those as packages that you would sell for your accommodation. And then it's just some really quirky ideas at the end, really. So this is Brewdog Hotel, where they've got these shower beer fridges. I'm not particularly sure I want to have a beer in a shower, but also you can't see it there, but in the shower they've got a whole range of beer shampoos and beer shower gels. So they're really sort of taking that theme through. Move on, Charlotte. This is the Biker Boot Inn in Scarborough, and they've got this quirky boot chandelier as a sort of just a feature. And then this one final image, Charlotte. This is actually a place called the Artist Residence in Penzance, where they invited in local artists to do different murals in the bedrooms. And again, it gives you that very distinctive, quirky feature. And they also feature local art throughout the premises. So it depends really on what you're interested in and how you can work with other people. And then just the final slide really is marketing. Now, I'm not a marketing expert, and there's plenty of other sources of information on marketing, and you probably need to do your research on marketing. But these are just a few tips that I just wanted to share with you that I've picked up from various people I've spoken to, webinars and seminars I've been to. So I think the first thing in terms of marketing is to be very clear about who your target markets are, and don't necessarily try to be all things to all people. So make sure that you're targeting that market and understanding where that market is going to be looking and booking. Think about your pricing, and I think in terms of pricing, I would say don't overprice, but also don't underprice. So if you think you've got a really good quality product, then you should price it accordingly. Don't be afraid to do that. And if you think you're the top in terms of the competition, then actually you need to be the highest priced. So just think about that. It's always easier to drop your price if you find you're not getting the bookings than to increase it. So if you set it at a lower rate, people are used to paying that. It's actually quite difficult to get the price up. So think carefully about your pricing, but don't be afraid to ask for a good price if you think you've got a really good product. Invest in a great website. You absolutely need a fantastic website. Your website, all sort of the market now is pretty much all online in terms of looking and booking for accommodation. Your website is your shop window. So if your shop window, it doesn't look good, you're not going to get people in the shop basically. So you need a really good website with good imagery that's easy to navigate, but also that website needs to be optimized for use from mobile phones and tablets, particularly mobile phones. So more and more people are actually looking and booking on the move from their mobile phone. So your website actually has to work from the mobile phone, so make sure it does. Definitely invest in professional photography. You'd be surprised really how often I see websites that have got very poor quality photography, and it really undersells that business. Even really good quality businesses don't necessarily have the right photography. And a picture tells 1,000 words, and a professional photographers can really make the difference. It's amazing how they set up the photographs and the difference that they can make. I would say you use the online travel agents, particularly Booking.com, also maybe Expedia as well, and maybe Late Rooms. I know they charge quite a hefty commission, but that's where the market is looking. So the market wants to buy through those OTAs, so you need to be on them basically. You can't avoid being on them. But also use social media, whether that's Booking.com, whether it's Twitter, or increasingly Instagram. I think Instagram is the fastest growing of the social media sites, and if you've got a very visual, Instagrammable offer, then definitely think about using Instagram. I think the advice I would give you in terms of marketing, and particularly in terms of using social media sites, is be focused and don't spread yourself too thinly. It's far better to work with maybe 1 or 2 social media sites and post regularly than to be intermittently posting across a whole range of different sites. And what you want to do is be building up your followers, and therefore you need to be posting as frequently as you can. In terms of reviews, you definitely need to be on TripAdvisor. I know from looking at some of the existing pub businesses on the webinar, some of you are not. So you need to be on TripAdvisor, because that, again, that's a key location where people are looking to assess their accommodation business. And if you haven't got reviews on there, people will think, well, is it any good or not? And I would say you also need to be encouraging reviews. You want to get as many reviews, obviously good reviews, so encourage your guests to leave reviews on TripAdvisor for you, but also take reviews seriously. And if you've got bad reviews on there, then actually, take it on the chin, and think about, what can you learn from that bad review, but also respond to that bad review in a positive way and tell people, thank them for the review and tell them what you're going to do about it. Don't respond in the I've seen some terrible responses where people have responded in a very aggressive way back to that. Obviously, if it's a bogus response, then you would need to do that, but be very careful about how you respond. But also respond to positive reviews and thank people for them. And also keep in touch with your existing customers. So many accommodation businesses forget to do this. It's far easier to get more business from an existing customer than it is to find a new customer. And there are lots of ways that you can keep in touch with your existing customers through regular emails or social media contact. But do that, because then that will really help. And also work with your local tourism department. They can help you. They might be able to provide you content and images for your website, and they can help with advice on marketing and also run various marketing opportunities. So if we can move on, please, Charlotte. So these are just a few quick slides. That's just just to show you how the difference that a professional photographer can make. That you can see yourself really wanting to sleep in that bed or eat that meal or enjoy that pint or sit by that fire. It really, the pictures really draw you in. So think about that professional photography. Those are just obviously online booking sites. I didn't mention, well, Chris mentioned Stay in a Pub. And yeah, Stay in a Pub is certainly worth looking at. It's a nice website. Got quite a lot of pub accommodation businesses in Lincolnshire already on it. So I think that's worth looking at, as well as the online travel agents that we've talked about and the social media sites. That's the range of tourism departments and DMOs you've got. So you've got Visit Lincoln, Visit Lincolnshire, Visit Links Coast, Love Lincolnshire, Wolds, and then some smaller ones. And I think also North Castilian District Council, South Holland District Council do have some visitor information on their websites as well. But definitely talk to those people, they can help you. So just a final slide from me then, really, just in terms of, I hope that the webinar has been useful to you all. We've covered an awful lot of information, and I'm sure you're all a bit brain dead now. There's been thrown so much at you, but we will share the slides, so hopefully you've got time to look through them at your leisure, and then also have a look at the Room at the Inn guide and some of the other material. But I think hopefully we've convinced you that it's good to look at pub accommodation. I think the keys to being successful at it are being clear about your target markets, focusing on quality at whatever level, whatever price point you're going to go in the market. Be as good as you can be, because that will be appreciated, and that will get you known, and that will get you people coming back and to you and sharing their good experiences. But also think about being different and authentic and how you can stand out for the crowd. But play to your strengths. Don't be something you're not. Play to the strengths of your property, but also your own strengths as a landlord or the business owner. How do you want that business to run? Add value where you can, and also just invest in dynamic digital marketing, and make sure that you sort of brush up your skills on that digital marketing side, or bring people in that can help you. And then just finally, sources of further information, I'll just leave that slide with you. So there's more information that you can access. And if you want somebody to talk to, then I would suggest go to Nikki. Go to Nikki at Greater Lincolnshire, because she's leading on the Pub Accommodation Development Programme, and she can signpost you to other people that can help. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you ever so much for that. Definitely lots of information there to consider. So that does bring us to the session. Apologies that it's overrun slightly. but we do hope that it's provided you with some inspiration for your pub business. Should you wish to continue the discussion or provide further comments or ideas at all, then you can, as Andrew said, get in touch with Nikki via the email that's on the screen just there, or alternatively you can email teamlincolnshire@lincolnshire.gov.uk. I'd now like to thank our guest speakers and panellists, Andrew, Chris, Sarah, Lynn and Ian, for sharing their insights and expertise with us, and also thank you for attending today's webinar. Once you leave this session, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you would take a bit of time to complete that and provide your feedback, including any suggestions of topics you wish to see delivered in future webinars. You'll also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar, along with some links that our guests have been referring to throughout the session. Now, please keep an eye on both the Business Lincolnshire and the Team Lincolnshire websites for the latest business updates. And if you've not already done so, subscribe to our weekly newsletter at www.businesslincolnshire.com. So on behalf of Team Lincolnshire, Business Lincolnshire and today's presenters, thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.